when I think of Guam and its position in the world, I think that the conversations about the regional sustainment framework start to build on this, that where Guam can have a place to, I mean, you've got the Gamma Institute and what they're doing and building out the idea of a regional sustainment framework prototype in Guam and testing that out and building on that. That's how I kind of think these concepts from the consortia model could be applied in Guam that would be really powerful.
Mappa Day, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. My podcasts drop at the beginning of each week. Also, be sure to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News, first and third Fridays of each and every month. All right, well, I'm very excited to have our guest today. She is a nationally recognized expert in defense industrial policy, workforce development, and innovative government contracting models. She is a senior fellow at the Center for Government Contracting at George Mason University's School of Business. She's a former professional staff member for the U.S. House Armed Services Committee, where she led policy on industrial base and acquisition issues. She is a key contributor to national studies and legislative language on defense consortia, innovation ecosystems, and other transaction authorities. She holds an MBA from the Naval Postgraduate School and a Bachelor's of Science degree in computer science from the United States Air Force Academy. She co-authored many reports, of which The Power of Many is one that we're going to be talking about today. She's an advocate for modernizing the defense industrial base by expanding the role of non-traditional contractors, regional tech ecosystems, and dual-use manufacturing. Her work influences how the Department of Defense leverages innovation, expands its industrial base, and equips forward deployed forces. And today, we'll explore how these national models can shape the future of Guam and Micronesia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast, Ms. Stephanie Halcrow. Stephanie, how are you doing?
Great, Rob. Thank you so much. Man, you listed a lot of things that I do and participate in, but you forgot the most important one.
That is that you are my classmate from the United States Air Force Academy, and we have that link. And we got a chance to link up on active duty as maintenance officers together over in Italy, where we enjoyed a very exciting time supporting missions over in the Balkans. So, yes, that is probably the most important thing.
Absolutely. It's great to see you, Rob. Man, it's been a long time, and I'm so happy to join you on this podcast.
Yes, it's so great to see you and to be able to link up like this. So, we have a tradition here. We start off the podcast with some icebreaker questions, kind of get a sense of where your head is at in terms of innovation. So, what's your personal definition of innovation?
Oh, man. First off, that word is so overused. But but that means we need to really think about it. And so whenever I think about a word, I usually go back to the dictionary and say, what does the dictionary define as the word innovation? And innovation is, new ideas, new concepts, new devices. And so that's the dictionary definition. But I would like to add a little bit to that definition, and that, like, in the military, the DoD context, it really is what is being added value-wise with the incorporation or the integration of new ideas and new devices, new methods. So it's not just that something is new, It's not just that it is new and adds value, but it also has to be incorporated or integrated into the existing systems, whether they be weapon systems or business processes or whatever it might be.
Innovation leaders, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson here. Are you ready to elevate your vehicle fleet operations? Fleet Solutions is an AI-enabled fleet management system. Fleet Solutions provides real-time video, smart analytics, and total efficiency. Keep your people safe and keep your business moving forward faster than ever before. Fleet Solutions, arriving tomorrow, today. Visit thefleetsolutions.net or call 671-988-9748 to schedule your personalized demo and revolutionize your fleet operations today. So, what's one piece of technology or perhaps a defense acquisition program that you've seen that you believe truly represents transformative innovation?
Yeah, not just one program, but really like a concept, because I think sometimes concepts are more important than just one program because concepts
Mm.
and paradigms can be applied to multiple programs across, whether it be the Department of Defense space or other federal government organizations or even commercial industry. And so that transformative innovation that I'm seeing out there and I'm getting really excited about is what I'm calling digital transformation for acquisition. Now, this is different than just digital engineering. Digital engineering is a subset of digital transformation for acquisition, but digital transformation for acquisition, it starts with the requirements. It flows through prototyping, through testing, through production, through fielding, and through sustainment of a program of a weapon system. And it's more than just scanning your documents and putting them into a digital format. It's more
Let's
than,
hope so.
yeah. Well, I had a conversation with some folks at Eisenhower. I was guest speaker there on this topic last fall, and I was talking about this idea and getting feedback, soliciting feedback, and somebody said, we do our contracts, in a computer program, and I said, okay, but how does that digital environment flow to production, to sustainment? Are you still requiring hard copies of documents from the contractor? And they said yes. Sheepishly, they said yes. And I'm like, well, that's not digital. That's just we've just put something in a digital format, and that's not transformative. Um, but back to my definition, digital transformation for acquisition, is something new. It adds value and first and foremost, probably integrates all the different activities that are in the acquisition process.
Hmm, yeah.
Sorry, a lot to
So,
think about.
no, I love that concept. And I know you've written and spoke about the concept of digital acquisition and what that means and how to actually really drive that. And I really think that that is the future, be able to take so much of what we do in an acquisition um, program and basically work in cyberspace together, right? We move a lot of that into the physical world. So we're collaborating, we're um, we're approving, we're coordinating, we're building, we're doing everything in cyberspace instead of the physical world. And that provides a lot of different advantages, particularly if you're able to have one seamless cyber environment where that in that digital environment, you can continue to collaborate all the way through the life cycle of the weapon system or the acquisition program.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one example of a program that has embraced this digital transformation for acquisition is the NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance Program. They started from the very beginning saying, "Hey, we're going to force anybody who wants to participate in this program to operate in a collaborative workspace. And so that ensured that everybody had a fair footing to operate in that space, and that one certain type of companies couldn't dominate over other type of companies. It also implemented approach that I love, which is MOSA, or modular open system architecture. So when you're
Yeah.
in, a digital environment, it promotes that as well. When you look at SpaceX and some of the reports that are written about, articles that are written about SpaceX, and how quickly they are able to move from concepts to actually testing of those concepts. It's because they have embraced digital acquisition. Digital transformation for acquisition is not just digital engineering, it's digital acquisition across the whole entire activities from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the layman out there, that program you were talking about, F-47 fighter aircraft.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. It's been called INGAD for such a long time that yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead.
All
Yeah, but
right.
it's the
So
latest and greatest.
yeah, latest and greatest fighter aircraft, F-47. So Stephanie, talk to me about what inspired you to dedicate a career to government policy, acquisition reform, workforce development, and transformation through the acquisition enterprise.
Oh wow, that's gonna make me get personal, I guess. So I mean, I think a lot of people choose their careers and their lifestyle based on family and influences early in life. Both of my grandparents were extremely involved in their communities, um, really like at the state level. So my one grandfather, he was Speaker of the House in the North Dakota state legislature. My
Okay.
other grandfather was like the state president of his professional association as well as a service association. So I grew up with the idea that that was kind of what was expected of you is to give back. So as you know, when you make the choice to go to college and you choose the Air Force Academy, they kind of suck you in, and they brainwash you a bit about how good it is to continue to give service to your country, which I totally bought into, hook, line, and sinker, and I still do, absolutely. But when it got time to transfer out of the military, to retire from the Air Force, I guess once you've done a career in the Air Force, you're like, hey, I want to continue that. And so I was really blessed to have an opportunity to work on Capitol Hill and continue that. And frankly, when I left Capitol Hill, I want to keep doing the same thing, and working for organizations like the Center for Government Contracting at George Mason is part of that. Working with National Defense Industry Association, NDIA, is also part of that. And then, doing conversations like this is part of that. So I want to ask
So,
that question. You answer that question.
well, first, let me get the rest from you.
Okay.
Did your time on the flight line, in the bomb dump, in the back shops, inform what you brought when you were a professional staff member on Capitol Hill, talking about policy and what things to uh, basically fund in terms of um, acquisition programs and stuff like that. Is that really kind of something that stayed with you? That heart for the mission and touching those pieces of hardware and technology and the maintainers and the operators who actually operated and supported it.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, I would highlight my two assignments in the organic industrial base. In both of those assignments, I really gained an appreciation and love for manufacturing, for maintenance, repair, and overhaul, and the
Hmm.
challenges that are associated with those, not just in the engineering, but in the funding, but in workforce, and balancing that with the operational needs of the Air Force. So I took all of that to my time on the Hill. And so it was really like a perfect fit for my work, working on acquisition policy and industrial base policy to say, hey, how can we bring all these different pieces and parts together? And what authorities does the Department of Defense need? And sometimes, what help do they need in achieving those goals that Congress sets for them?
Yes, yes. And then I add from my own personal piece of it, since you asked, you know, I think my time also in the industrial depots during the logistics career broadening program, and then later on when I came back as a group commander running the commodities maintenance group
Right.
at Oklahoma City Air Logistics Complex. Um, there was always the art of the possible, the Lean Six Sigma that was being pushed to transform how we did processes so that we could streamline and increase throughput um, of production, MRO production through the complexes, and that was very important. But then in my last assignment in the Air Force, when I was working at headquarters Air Mobility Command, I really got to work on the idea of transforming and creating a digital ecosystem for Air Force aircraft maintenance. And that was informed by my time at University of Tennessee. The Air Force Acquisition Enterprise sent me there to get the MBA and learn kind of cutting edge business practices to bring back to the Air Force. And what I saw was all of this stuff was happening out in industry. Just amazing things. We're on the cusp of 21st century revolutions that were going on out there. But when I look inside of the Air Force enterprise, not much has really changed over the decades. And it was like, wait a minute, we should be leading the way with this, not just, on par. So I really was committed to, what can we do to really put what we do on a day-to-day basis on the cutting edge, just like what we saw was going on in the tech industry out there. And I'm still dedicated to that.
That's so awesome, Rob. And what you were doing at Air Mobility Command, so important to the warfighters. And I mean, you've mentioned so many activities that bring memories to my mind. Time at Tinker Air Force Base. Thinking
Yeah.
about the art of the possible. And then I also did a number of classes at University of Tennessee. Man, they do such great work there. Doing the
Yes.
classes on supply chain management, lean processes. In fact, my favorite course there is lean for business processes. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to take that course, but I was actually just talking with somebody.
Srini, Missy, and Ken teach that course.
No, so somebody else teaches the course, but the thing about lean for business processes is the idea that like paperwork can be a production activity as well, and we can look for
Yes.
value add and eliminate
Yes.
non-value added from those processes. And I was just having a conversation with some folks in ANS last week, and I was like, we keep talking about policies and new legislation, acquisition reform, and sometimes I wonder if I should call myself a reformed acquisition reformer. But it's I think it needs to transition to be more about the tools and techniques that we think about that the workforce needs to use. And digital transformation for acquisition is one of those. But I also think applying process improvement to business processes, which most of the acquisition process is a business
Yes,
process when you lay it out, is super important.
yes. Who was the instructor for that when you went through?
Oh, I know you're going to
Do you
ask me
remember?
that. I can't remember. I'm just, yeah, I'm just blanking on it. I'm so sorry. I will look it up and we can post it, post a link to the class. That's terrible.
No, that's all right. Really great folks, and like I said, in the MBA program, it integrated all of them all the different instructors and elements of all of those shorter courses in there. So I really felt blessed to be able to go through that. So, but you're right. You're absolutely right. Um, applying lean and those kind of cutting edge process improvement methodologies to administrative processes, acquisition processes, procurement processes. It's not just for industrial processes. So
Sorry, I'm not texting my friends. I'm looking up the name of the
you're
instructor.
looking up the name.
Goodness gracious. I will find it because he was one of my,
That's all right. That's
yeah,
all
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, Stephanie, can you talk to me about the mission and activities of the George Mason University Center for Government Contracting? What do you all do there, or what's it all about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So first off, the official title is Baroni Center for Government Contracting. Greg and Camille Baroni, a few years back, uh, wanted to sponsor the organization. They are leaders in the GovCon, to the government contracting world. Super successful businessman, businesswoman in that area. So that is kind of the new title of the Center for Government Contracting. So I'm really happy to be affiliated with them. When I left the Hill, they're one of the first organizations that I affiliated with. And they look at a few different activities. They do research on how to improve government contracting. They do education, and that is with the MBA students at George Mason University. And they hold a number of education activities. And so these take the form of webinars, of workshops, of conferences, one day symposiums, if we call it that. And so they're just super active in the federal contracting space and Department of Defense contracting space. Being thought leaders, that's a term that folks in DC use that's often not used other places, but being thought leaders and talking about the important issues and putting potentially new ideas out there that might add value, that if industry or government was to pick those up and integrate them into their processes could actually be called innovative. So
Mm, mm. So let me ask you this. Does the center do any work uh, below the federal government level, like with state procurement or anything like that?
So the center has done a little bit in that area. Most of it is with local organizations. So in the Northern Virginia area, organizations that are, next to George Mason. George Mason's in the Northern Virginia area. So
Yeah.
the center has run workshops. Conferences on specific issues that those organizations are interested in. And those have been very, very successful. I think, being a Virginia State university, typically other states would lean on their own state universities to do these things. But the Baroni Center for Government Contracting is really the only one in the country. And so I think the center would welcome any other state or territory if they were interested in collaborating on a research project or education event. So I just, keep the door open. Absolutely. Let's talk.
Yeah, so I was asking about that because about a month ago, um, the Chamber of Commerce, couple of other professional business organizations sponsored a Guam government procurement conference. And the governor has thrown down kind of a gauntlet to improve and help streamline Guam government procurement. And the Speaker of the Legislature, who I had on the podcast um, a couple guests back, has kind of taken that as his baby, if you will, to kind of improve government procurement in government uh, the government of Guam. So looking at models, looking at templates for success and ideas, that might be something good that maybe the folks here could reach out and learn something about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to connect.
Yeah. All right. So now the heart of what we want to talk about here.
Yeah.
Can you give us some context for the center's July 2022 report entitled The Power of Many, Leveraging Consortia to Promote Innovation, Expand the Defense Industrial Base, and Accelerate Acquisition? So talk to me about what that paper, what that report was all about, and kind of some of the main points and conclusions, takeaways from that.
Thanks. I appreciate you asking. So, I was approached by a colleague with the idea like, hey, let's write a report on consortia. And I told him, I said, I have no idea anything about consortia. I said, in fact, when I was working on the Hill, these different consortium would come and talk to us. And I really never quite understood what they were about or what they did and whatnot. And I said, so if we're going to write this
Some
paper,
examples of the consortia for those who are watching and listening, because a lot of people might not know outside of the defense industry, and even some people in the defense industry aren't familiar with it.
well, thank you. Right, I totally agree because I worked on the Hill and they would come and brief me and I didn't understand what they were about and I wasn't familiar with them. And so really this paper was about defining who they were, what they did, and frankly, we the paper actually codified a term called the consortia model. And so, to answer your question, the consortia model is a relationship between the consortia, which is industry members, um, a government sponsor, and typically some sort of what they call a consortium management firm. So they each have specific roles in that relationship. So the consortia is their role is to bring industry together. It's typically done around a particular technology focus area. The government sponsor typically has an interest in that technology focus area. So the government sponsor says, "Hey, consortia, if you would get together industry in this area, it'd be really helpful because we would like to be able to reach out to them and talk about requirements and maybe do some prototyping." The consortium management firm is the organization that helps industry do the business with the government. So the consortium model typically uses, not all of them, but typically uses other transaction authorities. And so other
Mhm.
transaction authorities are meant to help uh, streamline the ability for the government to do business with industry, with academia, um, for research and development, so prototyping activities. And
Well,
so,
how is an OTA a little bit different from a program of record that most people are familiar with? Defense program of record versus an OTA activity.
yeah, so an OTA is a contracting vehicle. So it is a contracting vehicle that is used to establish a relationship between government and industry or academia. And a program of record could use an OT as its contracting vehicle. It doesn't often happen because the way the laws are written right now is that an OT is first required to be used for a prototyping activity. And then if the prototyping activity is successful, the OT could be used to let a production contract based on that prototyping. But what we actually see in practice, which is somewhat disappointing, but what we see in practice is that the government will use the OT for the prototyping effort. And if it is successful, they will then switch to a FAR-based contracting vehicle for the production of the activity. So an OT can be used for a program of record. I'm actually not sure I know if there are any examples. There probably is one or two out there, but they are definitely used a lot for prototyping activities. And so that was one of the things our paper looked at is, what benefit does the consortium model, which usually uses OTs, have over the government just going straight to an industry partner? So one of the things that our paper showed was, our research showed, was that because of the rules surrounding an other transaction authority and that there's a requirement for a non-traditional defense contractor to be involved, we found that consortia had a large majority were non-traditional defense contractors. In fact, we surveyed, we got data from 12 of the 42 consortia that were existing at that time in 2022, and we found that 78% of the members of those consortia were non-traditional defense contractors. Now,
What do
there's
you mean by non-traditional defense contractors?
Yeah, the definition of non-traditional defense contractors is a contractor that does business with the Department of Defense that has not used cost accounting standards within the last year. So that means that they haven't had a certain type of contract that requires them to do cost accounting standards. When you peel that back, the thought is that a non-traditional defense contractor would be somebody who hasn't had a CAS, cost accounting standards contract, so that might mean that they're new to the defense industrial base. And if we go back to our conversation about definition of innovation, and
Yes.
that the dictionary definition is something new: product, services, device, method. Um, so the definition of non-traditional defense contractor is really trying to get at that new aspect that, hey, if you haven't used a cost accounting standards contract, or a contract that requires cost accounting standards, then maybe you're new to the defense industrial base. But then I'd just like to highlight how I've added to that definition and said, hey, you need to bring value, right? And your products need to be integrated into existing products. And I think
Give me
that's
an
some,
example of that.
yeah. So, um, it's a good question. I know all your questions are good. Um, so you could go to one of these organizations, that the innovation organizations that are out there, and
Hmm.
they could have an event, and they that could call on industry to bring their innovative ideas. And they could bring an innovative idea that's a really cool thing, but if it's not able to integrate into how the Department of Defense does business or how the Department of Defense deploys forces, it's not necessarily useful, or there's not value to it. So an example might be, um, a drone might be a very new idea, a new concept, a new platform. But if it doesn't integrate with any of the other sensors, or integrate into the communication systems that the Department of Defense already uses, then I'm not sure how much value it provides. So, not saying all drones are that case, but just as an example, a drone could be really cool, really new idea, but only once it gets integrated does it add value and become interesting. Does that help?
So it helps. So let me read something back to you, and you tell me if I'm on the right track or not. When we're looking at some of these non-traditional defense contractors, right? People who might be in the cutting edge technology space, and we're trying to get some of their goodness and then apply it to a Department of Defense use case, right? So let's say Open AI does ChatGPT or whatever. They're not really known as a defense contractor, they're high tech contractor. But let's say we specifically wanted them to build some large language models specifically for deep learning, AI in the military, right? And we wanted to reach out to them for that. They would be considered a non traditional defense contractor in that example.
So I don't know if OpenAI has done any cost accounting standards contracts. So I don't know that answer. But you would think that companies that have a very, 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 very large commercial base and or have
Yeah.
never done business with the Department of Defense would certainly fall into that category. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So you were talking about um, how this consortium model might add some value before I interrupted you. Sorry, I
No,
keep
no, this
on
is all,
jumping in there
yeah,
with
this
that.
is
So
great. Yeah,
so
I mean, so
continue on with the where you think that this model has value.
yeah, so if we build on your idea of OpenAI, having this large language model that the government might want to use. So, if there was a government sponsor that said, "Hey, we're very interested in technology in this area," they would go to a consortia that potentially was gathered around a technology focus area. That technology focus area might be AI. I'm not sure there is a consortium in that area, but there might be. And they would say, hey, we have some requirements that we want to work on, and it's X, Y, and Z. And one of the benefits of the consortium model, and also facilitated by the idea that they're going to use another transaction, is that when the government puts that requirement out, there can be a free-flowing conversation between industry and government. And what we found with this, and there's actually a case study in the paper that talks to this, is that sometimes industry's feedback helps tell the government that, like, hey, your requirements aren't quite on track. Sometimes, like, your requirements are completely off base. Sometimes your requirements are in the Stone Age and we've progressed so far. So, with that consortia, you can get a collaboration between government, between industry that you don't have unless you're operating within that consortia model. The case study that we see in the paper talks about a chemical component of explosives that was lacking in the Defense Industrial Base. And so the Office of Industrial Base Policy went out with an RFI, request for information, to industry saying, who can help us in making this chemical component? And they got zero responses. So they then turned to a consortium and they said, hey, consortium that is focused around armaments and munitions and explosive technologies, could you help us have this conversation? And so that consortium was able to bring together about 150 people. It was during COVID, so it was an online conversation, But the feedback from industry was that government didn't have their requirements correct, and that's why they got no feedback from industry on their initial request. So government was able to refine their requirements, put it out again, get inputs, and then move ahead on their prototyping activity. So that's one of the benefits of consortia is the collaborative aspect of it. But if I can not talk too long, but move on to like a second point that kind of talks to like why a company like a non-traditional defense contractor, I won't say OpenAI anymore, but a small, let's say, non-traditional defense contractor may be reluctant to do business with the Department of Defense is because of the bureaucratic burden of doing business with the federal government. And a lot
Right.
of that bureaucratic burden is there for a reason. There are public policy goals that, frankly, are in place through legislation that drive some of this bureaucracy that we see. Now, I also say that a lot of the bureaucracy is created and maintained and fostered by the executive agents, by the Department of Defense, on their own. Regardless, putting that aside, the consortium model helps with that interface. So they provide for the contract management, the invoicing, the connection with the financial systems, and it basically alleviates the non-traditional defense contractor from having to build those capabilities in-house as they try to work with the Department of Defense, for the first time, and then they decide, oh, hey, we like it, we want to keep growing, so maybe we want to build out these capabilities. So that's the other benefit of the consortia model is the support to the non-traditional defense contractors.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great explanation and discussion, and really starting to see how the consortium model plus OTA has kind of a great 1-2 punch, if you will, in driving innovation. What are your thoughts about how this could be applied to Guam?
Well, I know we've had a conversation about activities at Guam, the Gamma Institute, what work they're doing in advanced materials and manufacturing, um, and and when I think of how the consortium model specifically could be applied to Guam, like I wouldn't get caught up in formal terms. I would really focus on the benefits that the consortium model does and organizing some activity that embraces those benefits. So, if you're looking to set something up on Guam that is really powerful, you want to have something that allows industry and the government to collaborate. You might also think about setting up some sort of mechanism to help the industry that might not be used to working with the government to allow them to work with the government easier. So now that's I'm kind of describing the consortium model, but you don't have to be recognized as a consortium model. You don't have to have consortia in your name to do that. To really think about, hey, what are all these components that we want to have as we're setting up this activity? The other thing that I would highlight about the consortium model is because they leverage OTs and their government sponsors are typically in the prototyping, research, and development communities. Um,
Right.
the consortium model operate mainly around prototypes. And so what I think is really interesting about prototypes, and I also just wrote a paper, co-authored a paper on prototyping. I would love to come back and talk to you about that. But the idea to, if you have an idea, start small and like work out the kinks. I mean, this sounds really basic, but it's surprising how often we don't do it. But work out the kinks, grasp the best practices, shed the things that don't work out right, and then build from it. And, when I think of Guam and its position in the world, I think that the conversations about the regional sustainment framework start to build on this, that where Guam can have a place to, I mean, you've got the Gamma Institute and what they're doing and building out the idea of a regional sustainment framework prototype in Guam and testing that out and building on that. That's how I kind of think these concepts from the consortium model could be applied in Guam that would be really powerful for the country, but also for Guam.
I like that there's already kind of a template for success that we could take what starts as Gamma, right? The Guam Additive Materials and Manufacturing Accelerator to build up this capability to 3D print, ship, and submarine parts. But then maybe that's kind of the prototype right there. And you use that to scale up and scale horizontally as well, and into a regional kind of thing. And like you said, regional sustainment framework. If the idea under the regional sustainment framework is to develop industrial capabilities forward in Micronesia. Okay, what are those capabilities for what systems? And then doing a similar kind of roadmap like what you did with Gamma to bring advanced manufacturing to certain systems to implant that capability, whether it be straight manufacturing, MRO, or advanced manufacturing, or all three, and embed that here in theater to support the overall defense objectives. So I see there's a possibility of it, and using this
Absolutely.
model as a way to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're already thinking what I think is the right way to think about like prototyping and the application of it. You know, many people think prototyping is just a widget, you know, and a small widget. You know, sometimes people envision a big widget, but really you can prototype services, you can prototype manufacturing, you can prototype whole entire organizations. There was COVID, building the vaccine for COVID-19 is a perfect example of the power of the consortium model and using OTs. So, you know, there was at the time there was already a consortium that existed around pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. So that consortium already existed. They already had the industry base brought together that were regularly interacting with their government sponsor. And so when they said, hey, we need a vaccine, but we don't just need a vaccine, we need to be able to produce it, a lot of it really quickly. They said, well, isn't that kind of a prototype? We've never done that before. We've never produced a vaccine in such quantities so quickly. And so the Department of Defense, well, actually, it was Health and Human Services that was manned by Department of Defense personnel. They said, "Hey, we want to use the consortia, use other transaction to prototype the manufacturing of millions of doses of this vaccine in a super short amount of time." And it was just really cool when you look at the what happened. So, you know, they put out the RFP. Within a month, they had four responses. They actually had one on contract. This was in June, July timeframe, and they were rolling out doses of the vaccine by December. And the four companies that were on contract were, frankly, companies we're all familiar with that we might have not been familiar with before. You know, Moderna,
Right.
Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer. You know, we may never have heard of those companies. We probably heard of some of those companies before, but those were all the initial applications to or responses to this RFP to build a prototype of manufacturing a lot of something very quickly.
Yes, yes. And I can really see the opportunity to use this here in Guam to kind of build up an industrial capability forward. And I really like the case study that you use with the COVID-19 vaccine. We've talked before off camera about um, kind of the logistics versus the um, acquisition community, right? So when you think regional sustainment framework and some of these other things, you're really talking about logistics and operations. And the acquisition side of things has a lot more defined, deliberate process to render an outcome, to get to a capability, whatever that capability might be. So applying kind of an acquisition model to the rollout of the regional sustainment framework in the Indo-Pacific theater helps give you a template of how you scale up and you manage the implementation of this. And the idea of using consortium plus OTA to prototype this and spin out different efforts. And then hopefully that leading to programs of record for actual MRO production, other kinds of activities for ships, for submarines, for aircraft, for unmanned vehicles, whether they be aerial, surface, or underwater. You have now a model for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to hear somebody from the logistics community somewhat admire all of the frameworks and processes that the acquisition community has because I think they would be very critical of all of the frameworks and policies and procedures that they have to follow. It's I think a little bit of a case that the grass is always greener on the other side. But having said all that, a regional sustainment framework, it's something that is certainly needed. It's something that I felt has been needed my entire career, is a better grasp on how we do sustainment, OCONUS, and not always relying on our transportation infrastructure to get us the parts and pieces. And frankly, one of the things that I hope our regional sustainment framework will finally address is the joint aspect of it. I remember I was at Al Udeid in Qatar, and Al Udeid has at the time, had a fairly robust maintenance repair infrastructure to support the Air Force aircraft. We had some Navy aircraft also at Al Udeid, and every once in a while we would support them with the machine shop or something, because they were there, they knew we were there, there was some support there. But there
Yeah.
was a unit in Bahrain that was a Marine unit in Bahrain that was just really, really struggling with their maintenance activities. And frankly, us Air Force people at LUD, just so close, we had no visibility of that. They had no visibility of the capabilities that we had. We could have certainly collaborated and helped that. Just an example of that, we fight wars jointly, but we don't sustain wars jointly. And I really think we need to
Yes.
think about that in a more collaborative, strategic perspective. And I really hope regional sustainment framework does that. And the stuff that you've mentioned, everything you talk about is a joint, like from submarines to ships to aircraft, whatever those activities at Guam, they could definitely be supporting joint activities.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. You're queen for the day, and you're talking to three distinct groups of individuals about how to kind of make this happen, if you will. Use this model successfully to help Guam and Micronesia and to support these objectives. One group is policy makers at the headquarters level, Pentagon, Indo-PACOM, that level. Another group is government of Guam officials, the governor, her staff, and stuff like that. And then the third group is kind of industry, folks who have the technology, who have the industrial capabilities, who would like to get involved in it and setting up capabilities in Guam and throughout Micronesia. What would you say to each one of those three groups about how to get there from where we are right now?
Yeah, so since I'm queen for the day, I get to invite who I want to this party, and there's a I think an important participant that's missing, and that's the Congress. And so
Ah,
yeah, so
yeah.
I'm going to invite Congress to the party because and you know, we're all shaped by our experiences, and I know the tools that Congress has. I know how to use those tools. And so I'm going to start with them. You know, the conversation with Congress, with Department of Defense, with Guam, with industry, and bringing those folks together. And I'm not going to talk to them individually. I want to talk to them as a group because we should all be pulling in the same direction and say, hey, we have a desire to set up, to prototype a regional sustainment framework on Guam. So, how do we do that? You know, we need some sort of authority, maybe direction from Congress. That would be nice to have. We also probably going to need some funding or carving out existing funding. We're going to need some
Mhm,
prioritization of the activities. Like if we're going to deploy a regional sustainment framework and we'd like to start with Guam, we'd like Congress to prioritize and support that and have reasons for that. You know, in that conversation, we need to make sure that the talking points and the rationale for doing it in Guam first are solid. And I have never met an organization that after talking to them for a while, I didn't see how their talking points couldn't be improved and molded to making their case. So,
mhm.
but it's important that their talking points do that. And industry's got to be a willing partner. You know, industry has got to come to the table and say we're willing to invest in Guam. We're willing to establish factories. But at the same time, the government of Guam has to say, hey, we're going to make it easy for you to be here,
Make
right?
it easy. Yep.
And not only are we going to make it easy, but we're going to do something to like make you not ever want to go anyplace else. Um,
Yes. Yes.
so, you know, and I think, frankly, I split my time between DC and Arizona, and Arizona has done that really well. Arizona has reached out to industry and they've made it impossible for industry to want to go anywhere else
Yes.
because they say, hey, it's really easy to do business here. Your people are going to
Yes.
love living here. And, you know, this is not about, you know, handouts. It's not about um, incentives. It's about welcoming and making it easy to do business. So
Yes.
that's the group I get
Yes.
together, and that's kind of the message I would talk to them about. And then I would
Oh,
ask
that
how
was
I could
killer.
help them. I mean, seriously. No, seriously, because like,
Yes.
you know, how nobody wants to be given lots of great ideas and then, you know, have nobody help them through it. So,
Right.
yeah, I'd want to lean in and help them. So.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. That was better. That exceeded all of my expectations of an answer, particularly you leading off with Congress, because I completely, um, spaced on that. And you're right. It really does start with Congress because of the authority, because of um, uh, the uh, the funding process and all of that. It really does start with Congress and flow down from there. So spot on answer, A plus.
Thank you, Rob. I'm so glad to deliver for you.
I loved it. I loved it. So um, this has been a really great conversation, just like I knew it would be. What I'd like to do is kind of hand over the mic to you on any kind of parting thoughts wisdom or ideas that you'd like to the audience to take away from today's discussion, as well as to kind of point them to maybe some activities that you and the Baroni Center are doing or have coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, again for having me. I really appreciate it. Um, I guess I would just leave with this. Conversations like this that you're having, and I've been tracking you for a while now, are so important to further the art of the possible. You mentioned that before, the art of the possible. Um, but it actually takes people to collaborate, to lean in, to not care who gets the credit, and to elevate organizations that may not have uh, been first and foremost normally at the table. And so I kind of think about non-traditional defense contractors. So some of this is like the highlights that are part of the consortia model that I think about, and just kind of ending where we began, and that the consortium model is uh, a great model to follow. Don't get wrapped up on the name. Um, but this is the type of work that the Baroni Center is doing. There's another paper that I recently wrote on the power of prototyping. I co-authored that with my friend and colleague, Dr. Arun Serafin. We worked together on the Hill, and now he's at the Emerging Technologies Institute at NDIA. And one great place to collaborate and talk about all these things is at like events like they're having at ETI, so Emerging Technologies Institute, ETI, at the
Mhm.
end of this month. And I know it's a really long way to go from Guam to DC, and I'm not really sure about the virtual aspect of that event. But if there's any way to tune in to that and to get involved, I just really recommend your listeners that that's going to be great conversations. You thought this was good. Those conversations at ETR are going to be 10 times better. And something I didn't mention before in this podcast was that the end of the report, The Power of Many, that talks about the consortia model, is a list of consortia that exist. It lists the consortia, their technology focus area, who the government sponsor is, and the cost to join. So if you're not already a member of a consortia in your technology focus area, I really recommend that you look into becoming a member.
I, I appreciate you putting that on the radar scope, and thank you for coming and being a guest on the podcast and sharing your knowledge and insight and really giving us ideas, things to think about, and a model for innovation and resilience rather than just kind of talking about the physical aspect. You get us to kind of step back one or two steps and think about, how do I design this? How do I get from where I am right now to where I want to be in the future? So really appreciated the conversation. I know I learned a lot. For my audience, I hope you were inspired and learned something new today. Please watch for my podcast dropping weekly at the beginning of each week. Don't forget to follow me on all social platforms. Um, also on Substack now. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes. And check out my Innovate column at the Guam um, Pacific Daily News the first and third Fridays of each month. Um, until the next episode, we'll be looking forward to seeing you. And remember, no matter whether you're at work, at home, or at play, always innovate. Thank you.